Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to talk about kind of what's next for League. So talk about the preseason, talk about the upcoming matchmaking and champion select changes, some of the new items and stuff like that. So I'm probably going to skip over a lot of things. It's not meant to be a full preseason review, just kind of going to talk about what I think is interesting and what I'm excited about. So the return of Chemtech. Now, this is a controversial one. Some people aren't too happy with this, but you know, it's been changed. It's definitely a bit different from before. I don't really care too much about this sort of stuff here, but what I think is really interesting is when the drags change the map in a way that actually affects how you play it, because I think a lot of the dragons don't actually change really how you play the game. Like I think the Hextech drag is a really good example of a dragon that does. Like it creates like creative flank angles, and then the game really does feel different. I think stuff like the like whatever the fire drag's called, the volcanic drake or something, where it just like blows up various parts of the map. I don't really think this changes the game in a very meaningful way. Like sure, it's something you play around, but it's not really like doesn't change the game a whole lot, so I don't really care about it that much. But I think the Hextech Drake, really good example of something that I really like. And this looks pretty cool as well. So blast cones will now blast those in range twice as far as before. I think that's pretty cool. Honey fruits will upgrade into stim fruits. No longer slowing champions to consume them, granting a small bonus shield in addition to the usual heal. This kind of feels sort of useless, honestly. Like, I feel like most of the time you're picking up honey fruits, it is just, you know, you're walking from lane to somewhere and you're picking it up. I guess like the argument for this is that because it no longer slows and gives a bonus shield, it's something that you might actually use in team fights. But the problem is the honey fruits just aren't up enough for that to really happen. So I guess like they'd have to increase the spawn rate or something to do this. But yeah, it could maybe be interesting. But I honestly just think it sounds more annoying than anything if your opponent just like randomly RNGs a honey fruit right in the middle of a team fight and just like heals and shields off of it. So I'm not a huge fan of this one. You know, Blast Cone one's really cool though. Scryer's Bloom will upgrade into Stalker's Bloom, so when hit, these plants will now reveal a small circular area around the plant and a cone opposite of the direction it was hit, granting movement speed to his revealed champions and reducing wards revealed to 1 health. So I think that is very interesting for the Vision game. I honestly, yeah, I'm kind of just excited to see how that sort of turns out. That's a very different idea. I'm a big fan of that. Jungle improvements, I'm just going to skim over this. I don't care too much about jungle. I don't really play much jungle. Obviously, jungle interacts with mid a lot, but yeah, I don't really care about it too much. Now, communication tools. This is something I am both excited and sad about. So, one thing I've been saying a lot is that I think the solo queue experience in this game is pretty poor, if I'm honest. Like, I think I like League of Legends a lot, but I think solo queue is just very bad. And that's for like many, many reasons, like Champselect, matchmaking, as we're going to talk about later, and communication is a big one. So, personally, I would have really liked to see Riot add voice comms, but I don't think they will ever add voice comms. So, this kind of like confirms to me that they will never add voice comms, which I'm sad about, but then also I'm happy about the fact that they're adding more tools because I think solo queue especially does need some work on just kind of its health overall, because right now it is in a pretty unhealthy state, I would say. And new pings, like adding more pings, I think is a very good way to do this. It helps improve the communication in a pretty efficient way. So I'm pretty happy about this. And it's also really interesting. I've seen a lot of memes about this like voting whether or not to fight or give objectives. I think this is a really good idea, actually. I think there's a lot of the time where your team can't really agree on something, and this is something, especially like neutral objectives, is something that you know will come up, and your team can vote on. Now, I could see this being, yeah, I don't know. It's like you could maybe extend this to other parts of the game. Like I would like to see something where you can maybe submit a thing like this. Like for example, if your jungler wants to invade, you know, like maybe that would be a thing. Like they can submit, you can vote on whether or not. The problem with that, obviously, is there's like potential for toxicity with it. But I would really like to see this kind of expanded to kind of like do some more stuff. So they say here, getting your team on board with taking an objective can be difficult. Everyone can ping on my way if they can contest or retreat if they can't. Yeah, just saying it's confusing pretty much. But yeah, I would really like to see this just kind of some kind of functionality for players. Like maybe you say like you ping a location and then there's a different one, like you know how you've got the ping wheel up here, maybe one of these is like put to vote or something and it comes up. It would be kind of annoying though, like you know, imagine you're invading the topside jungle and like your bot lane gets this on their screen, so it would definitely take some work. I'm not sure how exactly they do it, but I would like to see something like that. If they are adamant on not adding voice comms or anything like that, I'd definitely like to see some kind of improved communication in that sort of sense. But this is definitely a good start, right? And it's a good building block for them to work up. Some vision vision updates. Don't really care too much about any of this. Okay, this was pretty interesting here. Top lane changes. They're making some adjustments to help top laners scale faster and hit those key items and level breakpoints faster relative to mid and bot. So solo lanes will now receive a 95% experience multiplier, so it's a bit higher from before, and duo lanes get a little bit less XP from before. And then the mid lane gold changes. All minions spawn, and the mid lane will now be worth 1 less gold before 14 minutes when last hit. Previously, only cannon minions were worth less gold, but were worth 10 less gold. So these changes as a whole, I guess, like, well, let's just talk about them one by one. So they're trying to make it so the level disparity between mid and the duo lane, or sorry, top and mid and the duo lane is a bit bigger. I think that is kind of important. Yeah, like a lot of those champions do need to stay ahead in XP, and it also feels like a lot of the time the bot lane does actually end up over leveled. But the thing is, I feel like that's more like a snowballing thing, you know, because I think when you're ahead, it's very easy for your ADC just to get solo XP and your support to just run all around the map. But when you're behind, a lot of the time the support has to kind of like babysit the ADC, and then you're kind of sharing XP. So I could maybe see this becoming more snowbally, where like the ADC doesn't really want to share XP with the support, obviously, like more than they have to. So this could be really interesting. I feel like this went under the radar a little bit, but honestly, it seems like if you can move your ADC into like the mid lane by themselves, like with support just like hovering or whatever, not sharing the XP, that could actually be big, because I believe that would qualify them as a solo lane, right? Like it's not specific to mid and top lanes. It's like just because they're by themselves, right? So that could be really interesting. I actually played with someone, an AD carry, who was like he thought solo XP for ADCs was very important. So gonna be interested to see what he thinks of that. Now the mid lane gold changes, making so all minions are worth 1 less gold before 14 minutes when last hit. So previously only the cannon minions were worth less gold. So I guess they're making cannon minions also worth 1 less gold instead of 10 less gold. Like I think this is just a change overall as opposed to like an addition. It's like a replacement. So I think this is kind of whatever. Like it's not something you can play around. It's not something to really think about. I guess the reason they did this is because like AFK scaling mid is too strong. But personally, I think this is because like the reason I think AFK scaling mid is too strong is because of teleport. That's something I'm going to talk about a lot at the end of the video, because I have some very strong feelings on teleport. So we will talk about that. Now, new and updated items. Updates to items and runes are probably the things I look forward to the most in any preseason or anything like that, because I think for me, it's like whenever a new champion comes out, that's like one new champion that you can play, right? And a lot of the time, it's not even in your lane. But when they make a big sweeping update to like items or runes, it changes the meta of like a lot of different champions. And so it feels kind of like you know, a lot of champions almost get released at once. At least that's kind of how I feel about it. Because I mainly stick to stuff that's meta, it's like, you know, I don't play these stuff that are off meta. And then when suddenly they all get buffed and a whole new group of champions become meta, it's like these champs have been like re-released for me. So I really look forward to rune and item updates more than champion updates for sure. Now, most of these are tank items, so not going to be something that I'm going to go through bit by bit because I don't care about a lot of these items, but there are some really interesting ones. So Rod of Ages and Catalyst, its component item returning, is pretty interesting. Now, one thing that could be a bit different is the fact that this is a mythic item. So this doesn't affect every champion, but if you think of like champions that were building Rod of Ages before, the champions like Rise, who, if we stick to the same build as before, would go like Tier, Roa, Archangel. So that's definitely a build that you could do in the next season. But there were also champions that would build Roa and then what would now also be mythic items. So you had a champion like Zillion that would go Rod of Ages Ludens previously, or, you know, Rod of Ages Liandry's, although back then Liandry's was different. So the Liandry's of these days, right? So the thing with that is, well, it's really good for Rise, obviously. That's the big one we're thinking of. But there are some champions that I could see this not actually being as good as you'd think just because it's a mythic item. So I'm really interested to see how this goes, because I think like Rod of Ages being a mythic it's I don't know, it makes sense, right? Like if you have something like, imagine you had, say, Liandry's, Rod of Ages, and Archangels. Like that seems just such a crazy 3-item core that it would be too broken. So I think it's like correct for it to be a mythic item, but it does impact some of those champions build paths that I'll be really interested to see. But obviously super excited for this for Rise. And it's good to be back in the game. Like, I think it enabled a lot of like mid lane champion playstyles that kind of like the more bruiser-esque champions, or champions that just were short range enough that they really make use of kind of the scaling and HP. So pretty interesting. And obviously its component Catalyst coming back, I think this is pretty cool as well. The thing is, a lot of those champions, again, I'll use Zillion as an example, that would build Roa. Again, not all of them, but some of them, they would really struggle to kind of play out the lane on the way to that item. And that's still kind of the same now. Like Zillion, for example, is really weak in lane. And now he becomes strong when he hits his first item. But even when you buy Lost Chapter and stuff like that, before then, it doesn't help you nearly as much as Catalyst. Like Catalyst was a very, very strong laning item because it would give you the HP and the mana, and it would just like allow you to stay in lane basically forever. Obviously, it does have some pretty abusable cases like Rise. But overall, I'm like pretty happy to see it back, right? Also, Abyssal Mask, I think this coming back is, or rather this being changed, is pretty interesting. So it's got a lot of HP, mana, like it normally does. The Catalyst passive, of course. And then here, Unmake, curse nearby enemy champions, reducing the magic resist by 5, plus 1.5% bonus HP. For each cursed enemy, gain 9 magic resist, and a champion can only be cursed by 1 enemy at a time. So this is, I guess, just like a, you don't cast this, as far as I know. It's just a passive, and that's kind of something I do want to talk about, because I really prefer when items are actives. Now, I don't think every item should be an active, but I think it's really cool when items kind of give you something different to play around. Like items that I think are kind of cool to play with right now are like Prowler's Claw, for example. It like really changes the playstyle of a lot of these champions when they get it. But the problem is, obviously, if there are too many actives, or one, people just like don't use them, especially if you're new to the game, it can be very overwhelming. And now League's nowhere near this point, but like I've been playing a lot of Wrath Classic, right? And I've been playing a sub-rogue in Arena right now, and I swear my entire keyboard and mouse is like abilities, right? Like there are just so many abilities that I need to have bound that it's like really overwhelming, especially if you're like a newer player. So I don't think League is anywhere near that point, but I think I at least prefer to have more. I'd like more Dota item style, where it's like more active items, some stuff that's like really cool choices, and not so much just like stat sticks and passives. But maybe that's just a me thing. Obviously, like you don't want to make itemization too complicated, but at the same time, you want itemization to have some skill expression to it. So it's kind of a complex topic, but yeah, I'm pretty happy about Rod of Ages and this being changed, though. That looked good. So there's some other tank items. Again, don't really care about this too much. Turbo Chemtech not being a mythic item is very interesting. Could be some weird builds coming out of this, like Sunfire. Oh wait, Sunfire's not a mythic either. I actually didn't see that. Okay. So that definitely adds some build variety to tanks, which I think is pretty cool. Build variety is another thing that I think is really important, because at least for mid laners, there is not too much build variety. Like, I actually think the mythic system pretty heavily nuked the build variety, like now that you're kind of forced into building a mythic most of the time. And also a lot of the items afterwards are just like, you know, they kind of have one item per class. It's almost like, you know, it's not you build your mythic and then you can choose from, say, 10 different second item AP items. It's like you complete your mythic and then, well, realistically, there's only 2 AP items that are good for you. So we just pick one of them, right? So I think that's like not super cool, but yeah, I think stuff like this, making less items mythic, is pretty nice. I would like to see just more items in the game overall. Spear of Shojin coming back, a bit of a controversial one. I'm sure a lot of people will be having Jack's nightmares from this. Yeah, I don't really know what to say for this. I feel like this was a very toxic item. It will be interesting to see if this kind of like gets balanced this time around, because it's like a cool concept, honestly. But it was like mega broken, right? I think if it's balanced properly, it could be good. But yeah, it's scary to me. So that's pretty much all the preseason stuff. Pretty cool artwork. I actually forgot I had that open. So Archangels. Now this is really cool as well. So the Archangel's Staff and Seraph's Embrace, they've changed this a lot. And this is another thing that I'm really excited about. So they've gotten rid of their health. It gives them a ability haste. Before it was giving ability haste from the passive, but they've changed that. AP increased from 60 to 100, and now grants AP equal to bonus, or equal to 1% of bonus mana instead of ability haste. So basically, it's just going to be a massive stat stick. And on top of that, you actually still get a little bit of ability haste down here, I believe. Yeah, dealing ability damage to an enemy champion grants you 3 ability haste for 5 seconds up to 5 times. So this looks like an amazing item. Honestly, now it's like really back to how Archangel was before, and I actually kind of like it a bit better than how Archangel was before. If you guys remember, before Archangel was kind of just broken, and every mana. It gave like every mana. It gave a giant shield. It gave a ton of stats, and it was just like super broken, basically, right? This is now like a very greedy option. They've gotten rid of the health. And it also no longer heals. So it's definitely just like a pure damage stat stick that kind of fills that second item spot, because you can build Rabadons as like your second item stat stick, but the problem with that is you don't really have enough AP for it to be worth it. Obviously, you don't get ability haste with it, and you also don't get mana. So this is quite nice for those champions that do just want a giant AP stat stick to get one second item. So I really like that they're adding a bit more kind of diversity into these items. So let's talk matchmaking and champion select. So they've talked about some stuff that they've recently updated, and this is quite important to me because at least when I was a pro player, right, solo queue was just kind of a means for me to practice, right? My main focus was on scrims and like stage games and stuff, but now it's like I pretty much just play League for fun, right? And the main way I interact with League is through solo queue, and I realize more than ever that solo queue sucks. So I'm glad they're making some changes to it. So let's talk about it. What's coming next? Champion select anonymity. So today, a lot of players use external websites, so like OBGG and stuff, third-party apps that provide all sorts of info about their teammates. With this information, players are drawing conclusions that aren't necessarily correct and pressuring their teammates into things that they might want to do. I feel like this part doesn't happen too much, like the pressuring their teammates into things that they might not want to do, but I do think that drawing conclusions that aren't necessarily correct is true. Like people just instantly dodge if something's wrong with the game, rather than like, you know, like people don't use their dodges sparingly. They just use them all the time. That's pretty annoying. If you guys have watched my stream, it's like 30-minute queues into 5 dodges. So this cutting down the amount of dodges is kind of nice, but there are some problems with it. But let's keep reading. Picking the exact same champion every game because it's the highest win rate on most played. We think the best version of the league is not one where you metagame based on the players in your lobby, weigh who's on a win or loss streak or playing a different champion, and dodge or pressure others to dodge when your setup doesn't meet perfect conditions. I agree with this. I think the sad reality is that because dodging is in the game, you do have to do this. And I think the champion select anonymity solves that in a way, but I do think there are still some problems with it. Let me just finish it off. So I'm still thinking about details of implementation here, but our starting point is likely to be hiding all summoner names in Champselect for ranked solo/duo. To expand on this point, we recognize that there are legitimate reasons that someone might need to dodge a lobby, but there are also a lot that aren't done in good faith. We want to impact the motivations behind why dodging occurs to reduce the frequency in a natural way. I think they are... I think this is correct. Like I'm down for champion select anonymity, but I do think that they are ignoring, or maybe just like not including, like I'm sure they know it's an issue, but they're just not including it. That many people dodge because of trolls, or because someone is off-rolled, or you know, something like that. Like I agree that you don't want to metagame, like ideally you don't metagame based on the players in your lobby, right? But if say you have someone who's just like a pure one trick, then one trick gets banned and they play something else and you don't realize until you get into the game because you can't see them, I don't think that's particularly fun either. So I don't know what the solution is for that. Obviously, like the solution for trolls and stuff is to have like more effective champ select punishments. Like I feel like right now you can kind of troll or soft troll champ select and nothing really happens to you. So I would like to see that come into effect. I'm not too sure like what to do about the like one trick thing, because I don't know. I would personally, I can only speak for myself, but I would feel very frustrated that I wouldn't be able to dodge someone that is basically just like an instant loss off their one trick. Like I think people definitely overdo it, right? Like, you know, if someone doesn't pick their one trick and they pick, say, their 45% win rate second champ, like I'm completely fine with that, right? But when someone like is a pure one trick and they have like 2 games on the next champion, they lock it in and it's got a 0% win rate, like I don't want to play that game, if I'm honest. And I think that's not very fun. So I don't know. It's something that needs to happen. Personally, I would like to see dodging just removed completely, so that like metagaming isn't like a ranked strategy. But I think before this can happen, they do need to do stuff like like removing or like reducing the amount of trolling in lobbies, you know, trying to really punish people for like champ select trolling, giving like more tools for reporting, because I feel like reporting just like doesn't do anything. I don't know. And I guess champion select anonymity is a part of that. So maybe this will lead up to no dodges, but I think at least for me, no dodges would make my queues like probably about twice as fast. So I'd really like to see that, and I guess this is a path in the right direction. pick order swapping. So commonly requested feature we already have in Wild Rift. Today you go through an extensive discussion in chat to effectively swap your pick order. Yep, so on and so forth. So just swapping this with a press of the button. I like that. I think there's no reason for that not to be a thing. So I'm pretty down for that. Loadout recommender. Oh, actually, one thing I just thought of, like just now, is maybe this could be like a little annoying if like people are like begging you into swapping with you because your role is more is like more valuable than theirs to have counterpick. So that'll be interesting to see if a metagame kind of evolves around that, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. Loadout recommenders. So this is just like, yeah, I guess. So it's not reliant on having a third-party program. I think this is kind of nice, especially if you're playing a champion that you don't normally play. This is kind of nice. I wonder if do they say here that they're going to add this to like normal games or anything? Because I feel like this is more useful for people in normal games of just like trying out champions and stuff. Also, I'm not sure if Flash Heal Renata is the best, but hey. Okay, so that's it for this one. So yeah, I'm pretty excited, I guess, about this. Like, I have some trepidation towards it. Like, I'm really not sure how this is going to work out, but overall, I do kind of like it, and I'm looking forward a lot to just Soloq being better. Like, I really think that's where Riot should put their focus, because playing Soloq is probably, in terms of like, League is a really good game, right? But in terms of how you interface with the game, I think League has one of the worst systems. Like, you can't really play with your friends. At least in like high-elo, right? You can't duo at all. So that like really hurts the streaming community, obviously. The content community hurts people that want to like duo bot and stuff like that. There are reasons for this, obviously. It does create rather imbalanced games. But yeah, it's like you queue up, you have no comms, you have very little in-game communication. There's lots of trolling, there's dodges, the queues, at least for me, are really long. So like Soloq itself is not in like a great, healthy position. At least like when I've been kind of comparing this to other games, it's like, you know, if I play a game like Apex, queues are fast. The games are relatively imbalanced, admittedly, but you get to play with your friends. If you think of other games, I don't play Valorant, but other games have been playing lately, like WoW. You know, if we PvP, we can queue up as 3 or 5. If you want to do raids, like you play with your friends as like a 10, or if you just want to play with more people, you have like 25. This is on Classic. Obviously, retail has flexible, so there's like, in terms of interfacing with the game, that's very important as well, as much as like the game itself. And I think the way you interface with League Soloq is pretty poor. We're up to 22 minutes. I didn't realize this would be so long, but now let's talk about the thing that I kind of really want to talk about, which is this. So this is a boot that they've said is not coming to the game. There's these 2 new items here. I think they said, yeah, this one slipped into the build. No plans to ship this boots at current times. They're in early exploration for top lane stuff. Now, I want to talk about this. So boots of teleportation. This basically gives you teleports on the boots. Personally, I would really like to see teleport either removed from the game completely, but preferably not. But ideally just either unusable for the first 6 minutes completely, or unusable for the first 10 minutes completely. And so I think this could be a really good way to do it. They could make it so teleport summoner is removed from the game and then replaced by it being on an item like this, or on these boots. And that would give you a teleport like in the mid game, but remove it for the early game. And so why do I want that? So for me, the laning phase is a lot less skillful because teleport exists. The problem with teleport for the laning phase is that it's actually the strongest early game summoner. People don't really realize this, but stuff like Ignite, it's good for early skirmishes, but if we're talking about like pure 1v1 laning, which especially as you go higher on the ladder or you start playing competitive, is going to be like much more common than like random skirmishes, teleport's really, really broken, because if you guys have watched my wave control videos, you know, you can just base TP and then like freeze the wave, so that makes it quite hard to play against TP if you don't have a TP of your own. And on top of that, it adds a ton of sustain, and that's a really big problem too. So if you think, you know, let's not include stuff like HP regen, but if someone has like 800 HP, teleport gives you a second health bar, essentially, right? So that goes up to 1600 HP. And then you've got Corrupting Potion, and then you can get 6 charges of that, because you get 3 charges the first time, another 3 when you TP back. And suddenly you've got this giant health bar of like, what, like 2.2k HP or something. And also your opponent, because they will be matching you with TP, doesn't have the ability to really chew through that, other than through poking, like they don't have an Ignite or something like that, because they're forced into taking TP as well. So you just end up with 2 people with these giant HP bars that can only really chip away at each other in terms of like CS and stuff like that. And the only like sizable loss of like dying or like losing a wave is going to happen when you finally chew through all that, like that first HP bar, they TP back, and you chew through that second HP bar. It's also the same with people that take second wind, endurance, shield, and then have TP on top of that. It's like they just have so much sustain, and it's honestly kind of boring. So I really want to see TP just completely unusable for the first 6 minutes or the like first 10 minutes or something, but I still think TP creates really interesting things in the mid game. So I think putting it on an item is a really, really cool way to do this. I'm not sure if it should be on boots. I'd actually like to see it just be its own item, like a teleport scroll kind of thing. Yeah, I think that could be like really, really interesting. I don't know. I just really want to see TP go on. It's just like it's really boring for the laning phase, and I actually think it makes competitive a lot more boring as well. Just because like this is one thing I've noticed again, because I've been like watching a lot of other games lately, is when you watch say like a game of like CSGO or Valorant or something like that, there is a lot of uptime in the game, right? Like the rounds are really short, at least compared to League, and there is like a fair amount of action in that time, and it's also quite easy to follow. If you compare this to a game like League or a game like Apex, there is significant downtime in the game, and then there's kind of this flurry of giant activities. So in League, it's like you have the laning phase, which is typically very slow, and then every 5 minutes or so, you see this massive fight around Dragon. Now, obviously, just removing TP doesn't really help too much with like, you know, speeding up the mid game. And I actually think the mid game's kind of in a fine spot, but especially the early game, a lot of the time, it's not uncommon just to see like pretty much just, you know, some CS leads or maybe a couple kills in the early game, but very rarely are there solo kills early, especially in competitive. Does sometimes happen in solo queue, obviously, but I think teleport, it just removes the skill of the laning phase a lot. It just makes it so much easier. And I think it slows down the competitive laning phase a lot. It would be really, really cool if we could go back to taking other sums in mid lane and weren't just defaulting to TP every game. There is a slight problem with this, which I think is there are champions right now that are reliant on having TP to just play the game because they're so weak in lane that without TP they can't do anything. So maybe it'd have to be rebalanced, but I would really just like to see TP completely nuked. Like, I'm just tired of it. It is interesting in the mid game. I like it for making cross-map plays. I think it's kind of necessary for allowing, you know, top lane to have an impact, especially in the mid game. But I really think it has to go for the early game. I just want to see, I think, remove TP, put it on an item, preferably an item of its own. I'll be really happy with that. And that's the same thing they've kind of got here. So this is like an item that I guess is meant to be a top laner item, but it's got the TP active on it, which is pretty interesting. It's also got like the Shen ult on it. So channel for 4 seconds to teleport to an allied champion. On arrival, all nearby enemies gain a 0 shield. I guess this is unchanged still, but yeah. So as you can see here, it's not being shipped presently, but I really hope they kind of ship something like this in the future. So I think that's pretty much it. Don't really have anything else to go over. I guess I'll go over to my YouTube outro. So I guess to kind of summarize it all, I am pretty excited for next season. There's a lot of things I really like. There's the matchmaking and Champselect changes. There's a lot of item changes, which I think are really cool. Communication changes as well. I really, really want to see some change to TP. That's what I'm like begging for. That'll actually make me so excited. Just the fact that laning phase will be so much more important than it is right now, which is like, you know, it shouldn't be the be-all end-all of the game, but it is the part of the game I enjoy most. And I think right now it's just really too easy to neutralize the laning phase if you're weaker and make your deficit only like a couple CS or whatever. So guys, that ended up a lot longer than I intended it to, 28 minutes. But if you did like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you guys next time.